Now we're going to move into interpretation. Observation, what does the text say? Interpretation, what does it mean? And especially did it mean to the original audience at that time. So I'm going to share with you now some of the questions that we ask as we do interpretation. And we do interpretation in different ways. One of the ways that we do interpretation is we go back to our observational clues that we that we have both identified and examined, and we work with those some or all of those observational clues in the interpretation step. Another way is simply to look at a book as a whole and ask some of our interpretation questions. Okay, and then there are kind of ways to do it in between those two. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share with you some of the questions we ask in the interpretation phase, and then I'm going to guide you through a process of how to get at using those questions, get at some interpretation, some provisional interpretations of some of the observational clues that we have identified and examined. Okay, and then as we get more toward the end, we'll take a look at the book as a whole. Okay, so as I've said in the past, you may want to pause the video at points so you can write everything down and then have all of that in your records. So the really first and most, not the only, but the first and most important thing we want to do when we're trying to interpret a text or an observational clue, which of course is something found in the text, is we want to bombard that text with why questions. Why is this said? Why is this repeated? Why is this word used but not that word, etc.? And the list can be very lengthy of the types of questions we can ask using this. And I'm going to give you some examples of this as we go along. But just be thinking of why questions. And I'm talking here about a real brainstorming session. There's no such thing as a crazy question at this point in the process, okay? No such thing. Now, after you start asking all these questions, then later you may decide, well, some of those questions I don't want to pursue, but you don't judge the question up front. You wait until later to discern whether it's a question worth pursuing, okay? So if any question comes to your mind about why is this said and not that? Why is this compared with X instead of with Z? Why did he compare chocolate with strawberry instead of comparing chocolate with vanilla? And why did he compare ice cream? Why didn't he compare apples and oranges? Or why didn't he compare strawberries with mangoes? Or why didn't he compare Coca-Cola with Pepsi-Cola? Just all kinds of why questions, okay? So you want to bombard the text with why questions. In addition to that, then we want to always have in our minds, what is the meaning to the original readers or hearers? What is the meaning to the original readers or hearers? Now I put readers and hearers because, for example, if we're studying one of the Gospels, we may be looking at one of the parables. So Jesus is talking to a specific audience in that day and time, and then Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John are telling their audience about that occasion. So you've got two audiences. In one case, you've got the hearers, those who were listening to Jesus. In the other case, you've got the readers, those who are reading or hearing read, the Gospel of Matthew, for example. So try to discern as you're asking all the questions, be thinking from the perspective of the original readers and hearers. Also bear in mind that figures of speech are just a normal part of communication in all cultures. May not always use them the same way, but so just be aware of figures of speech, and if we study another book together, I'll be introducing you to some specific figures of speech. So occasionally you may be wanting to know what the meaning of a particular word, term, or concept would have been back then. Okay, and another question to ask is, I can see what the text specifically says about something, but what might it imply that is not said? Or to say that differently, what might be inferred, even if it's not intentionally implied? Okay, so those are some examples of the kind of questions that you can be asking during the interpretation phase. And don't worry, I'll be helping you walk you through how to put flesh to all this that I'm talking about. Now, one of the things we always want to do when we're studying a particular passage or book is we want to think about the context, okay? The biblical context. So how does this relate to surrounding verses? How does it relate to the paragraph or segment? We haven't talked about paragraphs or segments. That'll come in another when we study another book together. If you decide to do this again, paragraph or segment. How does this fit with the rest of the book? How does it fit with any other books written by the same author? How does this fit in the Bible as a whole? So you do always want to bear in mind that these may be questions worth pursuing. And I'm definitely going to give you an example of that, at least to a certain point, in one of the observational clues that we'll be interpreting together. Okay? So I hope you got all those questions written down. Now, one of the things I want to make very, very clear here, some Christians have a real difficult time asking questions during this interpretation phase. When I ask them to brainstorm, why does Paul say X instead of Y? Why did Paul say what he said about Onesimus, but he didn't say the same thing about Aristarchus? Why did he say what he said about Philemon, but he didn't say the same thing about Archippus? Some people think that when we ask a lot of questions at this point in the process, they think that we're questioning the integrity or the authenticity or the authority of the Bible. But that is not the case. In fact, precisely the opposite is the case. It's precisely because we value the Bible so much that we are asking questions of meaning so that we can better understand the Bible and apply it to our lives. So we're not saying Paul has done anything wrong by using a particular word or phrase. When we question that, when we say, why do you use that phrase instead of another one? No, we're not saying it with that spirit of, why do you say it that way? No, we're saying, I wonder why he said it that way instead of this way. What is there that I can learn by noticing that Paul said it that way instead of another way? That's the spirit of this. So free yourself up from that sort of that legalism that sometimes Satan. Now, laws and rules are good, right? When they come from the Lord and are applied directly, but a legalism that comes from the enemy is not good. So be freed of that particular dimension of legalism that wants to keep you from asking questions of meaning that will help you better understand and apply the Bible. Okay? We're not questioning the Bible's authenticity. We're not questioning the Bible's authority. We're not questioning the Bible's integrity. We're asking questions of meaning so that we can better understand the Bible and apply it to our lives. Okay? Thank you. God bless.